Hello and welcome. The big banks globally were amongst the first to come into India and set up what was then called global captive centers and now are called global capability centers. What this means is really hundreds or sometimes thousands of people, young people, skilled in technology, knowledge, the specific skills, the domain knowledge to actually serve customers for these giant corporations sitting in other parts of the world. And some of these, like I said, are banks. So what have these corporations been doing in the last so many years with all these skills that they've acquired, and more importantly, where are these skills going and where will this take India as a larger question? To answer that, I'm joined by Arindam Banerrji, Managing Director of Wells Fargo Enterprise Global Services. Wells Fargo, as you know, is one of the biggest banks in the world. Thank you so much for being with us, Arindam.
Thank you.
So first question is that now you've been in this space for a long time, almost 17 years, in and out, but 17 years. So as you look back at the landscape, what has changed significantly now? And is perhaps in many ways an accumulation of all the work that we've done and the skills and the knowledge that we've acquired.
Govind, what you just said, that it's an accumulation over a period of time which is starting to bear fruit, is probably the appropriate summary. Because if you go back and think, is late 90, early 2000, the technology product companies, the Texas Instruments and the Intels, they were already at it. Right, in terms of running what was a capability center today. Financial institutions came in late 90s, early 2000s, and they're still coming in, right? The large ones mostly in the 2000s. Now, over time, what has happened is if you think of a bank is got multiple verticals, right? So they have businesses which have their product development teams, they have their sales teams, they have their distribution engines, then you've got sort of middle office, back office, operations, client service, technology functions underlying each one of these, risk functions. So what's happened, I think, from I'd say the first 10 years of this industry is most banks have really built and focused on building high quality individual verticals for every business. Now, when you think across these 8 or 10 different functions, India is actually probably the only unique ecosystem for those banks where they find it all under the one roof, right? So now
so
what's
when you say verticals, it could be in mortgages.
Could be in mortgage. I could have built, let's say for Wells Fargo, as an example, we built mortgage operations in India in late 2000s, and we built a mortgage technologies teams starting around 2006, right? Now, those teams have matured. They've started talking to each other. They've started collaborating with each other. They've started collaborating with the product teams, which have since evolved. And that's what has happened over the last 3-4 years, is that the connectivity between different specializations and competencies in an enterprise, that started coming together. Experience is built over time. People have moved and interfaced with the head office locations or the global headquarter locations. A lot of people have moved out, people have come back. So there's been a lot of talent mobility over the years. And I think this uniqueness which we have of the GCCs, as we call them in India, is that everyone sees them all under one roof. And if you can get that collaboration going, that's when you start seeing innovation coming out.
Right. And tell us, how does that play out for you at Wells Fargo? So what are some of the things that you're doing and you can talk about which is really influencing the way Wells Fargo deals with customers, or customers' experiences have changed in recent years?
So I think the one thing which Wells Fargo initially, when it came into India in mid 2000s, it was focused in technology. It was built around, just before the financial crisis. It basically, after that, the bank as a whole went through a number of M&A. We have the big Wachovia merger. We've acquired other businesses. So the bank has actually grown quite significantly at the same time, right? Now, beginning 2009-10, we started having operations functions, middle office functions. We started having risk functions, financial control functions, compliance functions. All of these started coming together, right? Now, over time, what's happened is Wells Fargo as an institution has completely integrated and aligned this organization, right? So we don't look at it as a separate company or a separate office. It's another legal entity. It's another region in the bank in which the bank operates. We operate in 3 locations in India and a location in Manila for enterprise global services. But we've got large operations in the United States. And this evolution over time has become extremely integrated. So what we have seen examples is, if a bank has new products being built, and not just technology refreshes, the bank, as is publicly known, has had certain remediations to be made in the way it works with sort of customer grievances, etc. And a lot of the redressal mechanisms around that for the bank over the last few years, and making it a consistent, controlled process across the bank. The process and the technology has been built by people in the locations that we are part of, Enterprise Global Services, as well as teams in the US, right? So, but a big chunk, as you can imagine, has actually been led from here in making that happen. So that's an example of where, we've put the sort of customer service and the customer processes up front. We share the same values as the rest of the bank, as part of, and leading with sort of putting customers first is part of those values. There are examples of segmented market penetrations which we have done, which have been based on data analytic teams, which have been running out of Bangalore or Hyderabad, and new markets got created for the bank, right? Some of the most successful card launches which the bank has had has actually been in recent times. They came out from some of the development was done over here. Integration of many of our global technologies as the bank has integrated, as the big efforts have happened over. So there are many examples, right, in terms of how we take this forward. We think that actually we only touched the most, and I'd still say we are early stage in terms of looking across everything that we have, right, and thinking through what's the art of the possible, right, across. So in an ideal state, I would want to get to is, the complete chain from product development to analytics and technology development, client service, all of these being patched together to basically work with our teams in the US as agile teams to deliver to our clients.
Right. So that also, I guess, in a way, you seem to be answering a question that I was going to ask you, that the people that you work with here, and it applies, I guess, to the larger ecosystem as well, beyond Wells Fargo, are now sufficiently or suitably ready for the digital world or the digital age, and everything that brings with it, which is more demanding consumers who are used to transacting on mobile phones and expecting Uber-like experiences.
So I think that there are two things I'd say. There is the traditional strength in India, which has been the sort of STEM graduates as they've come out of college and they've been built. Everybody's leveraged that, and they still continue to be some of the best in the world, right? Now that's been supplemented, if you think about it, over the last 5 to 7 years with a digitally savvy sort of, I'd almost put it as a democratized technology world, which is, these are not technologists, right? But the person who is coming in our operations space, persons who are coming into our risk spaces, they understand technology just as well. They understand some of the automation possibilities. They understand, R and Python. And nowadays I'm hearing of R and Python people are learning at school, right? So you're getting a digitally trained workforce as a norm now, right? So I think the possibilities of what can happen out of that actually are very different, right? And I think you always had this strength in technology. You've got the digitally sort of knowledgeable workforce coming in, combined with the fact that they understand banking, they understand risk processes, they understand what those product requirements are, they understand operational processes. You put these together, and that's when
magic.
Magic happens.
Right, right. So last question. So when and taking all of this as you look forward, what are the big opportunities you see? Where could India be going? And what are some of the challenges as well in staying the course and achieving those bigger objectives?
So I think, I mean, the opportunities to come to that first is I think, the banking as a business around the world, it's not unique to any particular market, is a constant evolution market, right? You will get disrupted. The competition will come from fintechs. It will come from technology companies looking at finance products. It will come from, all kinds of specific products. But at the core of banking is customers and trust, and to that extent, I think the model as a sustainable business model is, at least I believe, will continue to be there for a long time. Now, the opportunity for us is that as banking products, the speed of development increases, the speed of client requirements increases. You're dealing with a client set who's more digitally savvy as well, right? We'll have to adapt to that, right? And in that adaptation, I think digitization of work, digitization of data flows actually helps us in some ways in working in a global delivery model, right? So in many ways, I think our opportunity to be more integrated and closer to the client base that we have in the United States is actually a lot more, right? As this evolves, I think the counter would be, where can we slip, right? While talent is an opportunity, it's equally a risk, right? Which is that we're not the only ones looking for great talent over here, right? There aren't too many places in the world where you can get talent at scale, right? Of the quality that I just talked about a little while earlier, which is, tech savvy, digital, they understand process, technology, etc. So I think the threat will be there in terms of, will we actually have enough people, right? And I think the other thing is, pacing yourself at the right pace and doing things in a way that actually it's sustainable. It's not just a one-time effort, right? But we actually may build things, and we build in my case, the Wells Fargo locations that we have, in a way that they sustain into the future. They have a role in place. We don't talk about FTE numbers actually anymore, right? The value that we bring to the corporation is actually well beyond labor arbitrage, and that is actually going to increase as we go along. The
value add will increase,
right? So I think the future looks bright. It's about being measured about it. Yes, we are very confident about it, but you do have to treat carefully in terms of how things work. I mean, talent was one, infrastructure. It's another great one, which the public side of infrastructure in India versus the private side of what you can put in the offices, a very different quality, right? There's risk over there, right? How do we bring these two together to give us a sort of a unified quality? And therefore, for example, our involvement in the communities is basically driven by that. How can we make sure that the communities we live in are actually starting to look similar to the communities that we work in, right? And I think the other thing from threat I would see is from government regulatory is, I'd hope that there's a better appreciation and understanding of the industry and its risks, right? That we're able to bring across to the government and via Nasscom or otherwise, because we are a key financial services provider. We are systemically regulated. A big part of our operations are here. Most of our peers have exactly the same. You put that together, the systemic risk of India is actually quite significant, right? So we have to be careful that we preserve that stability that we've had over here.
Right. That sums it up well, Arindam Banerrji. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Govind.
Thank you.